And the mic is hot. I think. Well, mine feels normal.
Ow.
Oh.
My mic sounds nice, actually.
And we don't have any talented Mr. Ripley conversation to come in on this time where people randomly walk into. We should get some talented Mr. Ripley conversation. So we wore it all out last night.
I think we did. We really did. Although I just can't stop thinking about those European beaches and those small and tight little speedos that they were wearing in that movie. That was the most memorable thing for me. It was just like, oh, okay, yeah, that's definitely a look.
That's definitely a look. That's what they're going with. Fair enough. Fair enough. Can appreciate that. All right, I think I've got this thing retweeted and tweeted. I think I did that backwards. First, you got to tweet it, then you got to retweet it. From my understanding of how things work, you got it in the Discord. Noish.
I don't have the link in there though.
Oh, come on, they should know where the Twitch channel and stuff is by now. Let's go, DNVR rights. I was about to say good morning, but it's noon now, so never mind.
What would a subscriber or follower of DNVR? DNVR, okay. What other good play on words?
DNVRian doesn't really sound. I mean, it can kind of roll if you want to give it a little extra rhythm. DNVRian, but that's too long.
DNV Argentinians. DNV Oregons.
DNV Oregonians. DNVRI. The DNVR E's. No, we got nothing. That's for our own language.
DNV Arth Dakotans.
All right, now we're way off. now I think we should probably start the podcast now. I think that's
DNV Argentinians. That might have legs. Okay.
I don't know.
2 legs? Just 2 legs.
One. I think that has exactly 1 leg. I think that's a one-legged.
You need 8 to stand up in this industry.
That's right.
1 to 2 legs.
Yeah. DNV Argentinians. Tinians. All right. And on that note, let's get it going. Welcome into the DNVR Rockies podcast, brought to you by Mile High Green Cross. Remember to sign up for their loyalty program, and you will receive 20% off your entire purchase once per month. I am your host, Drew Kreisman. I am the managing editor of DNVR Rockies. Along with me for this one is our beat writer, Patrick Lyons, and hopefully many of you. We are live for this one on Facebook, Periscope, YouTube, and the Twitch. So hopefully you're following through one of those different venues, and you can get some questions or comments or really memories in here. That's what we're looking for today. We kind of started down this road several days ago when MLB Network was first showing Game 163, and it famously got cut off by news from the Boston Red Sox. As I think most of you were aware, Game 163 in 2007 for the Rockies against the Padres was replayed yesterday on various formats and in ways that allowed us to rewatch it, maybe not as collectively as we were all trying to the first time, unfortunately. But I think I'd like to finish out that conversation. I want to get every memories. Where were you that day? What are your memories leading up to it or for that whole 2007 run? And I actually, because I've told him today, I want to start with our guy, Patrick, because you were not a Rockies fan at the time. You were not plugged into every single day Rockies baseball the way I was, back in 2007. So I was very curious about your recollections of this game and of this whole 2007 Rockies team and the way, for a lot of people, they just came out of nowhere at the end of the season.
Yeah, for me, coming from New Jersey, I had to slip it in there.
Where was it?
You set me up. Set me up for it. Yeah,
So
the Yankees were in the hunt. They were actually the wild card team in the American League, and they're chasing the Boston Red Sox. And so, of course, I was more wrapped up in that. But my, initial thoughts at the time was, it was a lot like the Oakland A's, who went on to win 20 some games in a row, who got hot, got into the playoffs, didn't go very far, but it was still very much like, there's something going on there in Denver. That Rockies team, I might not be able to, you know, go through their entire starting rotation. I'm a huge baseball fan, so I've always been able to kind of run through at least the top 15 to 20 players on just about every team. And while there might not have been any superstars beyond Tulo, Helton, and Holiday, who were great superstars, and of course Hop and Atkins were kind of that next tier as far as the position players go. It very much seemed like there was something brewing there in Lodo. Didn't know it was called Lodo at the time. I just knew Coors Field and my family that I had in Colorado, they were really enjoying what was going on there, and that the team had captured something special. And when you go on a run like that, or even you start a run like that, that's really indicative of some of the clubhouse chemistry. It's indicative of the attitude and the general overall behaviors of a team, and just that no quit, thinking. And they had that going. And sure, it all could have been washed away with one win by the Padres in Milwaukee on the final two games of the season, but it didn't. And they ran in game 163. They ran into the San Diego, rather the Padres ran into the Colorado Rockies, and they were just a buzzsaw. And it was like, look out. And I couldn't have expected what would have happened in the playoffs after that, because frankly, you know winning, you're in, and that's the only thing it's concerned about. And it's a whole new season when you get into the playoffs. And to think you're just going to run through the Phillies and Diamondbacks like that and go 7-0, it's unthinkable. And then to get swept by the Red Sox. So
yeah.
it's all over the place. But the bottom line was, no matter where you were in America at that time, if you were a baseball fan, you really had your eyes tuned into the Colorado Rockies, because they were capturing something incredibly special that frankly doesn't come around that often that late in a season.
Yeah. Do you like? Did you sit down specifically to watch this game? Do you remember like making it an appointment, being a big baseball fan, or was it something you were kind of checking in on, going, "Man, those guys are still going"?
Yeah, I definitely don't. I definitely didn't stay up that late because, again, with the 2 hour time difference, the
Right.
game got started a lot closer to like 9 o'clock uh, at that point. Or actually, no, it was an earlier game. They started at like 5:30, so it was 7:30 when it started. And um, I was a school teacher at the time, so had to get up nice and early in the morning. So it was like, all right, well, ESPN will have it back when that was a thing. We're showing our age talking about how ESPN, boom, they had the content and the coverage. We'll find out to see if these Rockies are still alive. Also, growing up on the East Coast, the Philadelphia Phillies were, a big deal, and they were now the new kind of franchise to beat. I'd been going to a lot of Phillies games because I'm kind of equidistant between New York City and Philadelphia. So the Phillies at that time, they kind of became my team, because as nice as it is to win, it's not nice to expect to win year in and year out. And
Hmm.
at that point, when you were a fan of the New York Yankees, it was okay. Let's just go ahead and sign every free agent. We'll sign Sabathia, AJ Burnett, Mark Teixeira, all in the same offseason. And it's like, well, if you don't even make it to the World Series, that's a disappointment. And then if you win it, well, yeah, you should have. So
Yeah.
it became really, it didn't become as enjoyable, kind of pulling for the Yankees at that time. So I almost shifted my allegiance a little bit to the Phillies, because they stunk in the early 2000s and much of the late 90s as well. And that was kind of fun,
And all
going
of
to a
the
ballpark.
70s and 80s.
And long before that as well, yeah, they went a good 80 years before they even won their first World Series in 1980. So they were kind of becoming the team, and they had a lot of great young players, as I'm sure we may get into. So they had a little more excitement, a little more juice. They were kind of the underdogs. They were the up and comers. So it seemed like, well, no matter what happens in game 163, there's a good chance that the Phillies are probably going to knock them out because 2007 is going to be the Phillies' year. And of course, we know it wasn't. It was their year in 2008,
Right.
defeating the Tampa Bay Rays at the time. And then in 2009, they went to the World Series again, losing to the New York Yankees.
And beating the Colorado Rockies once
There
more
we go.
in the first round in a very close series that I still submit to this day, if we had instant replay, the Colorado Rockies would have won. Um, all the
Careful,
Houston
Drew.
street blown saves aside, the Phillies got quite a few very key calls in that series. I'd love to go back and do a rewatch of that.
I was gonna say, be careful of your retroactive instant replay because we're probably going to be getting to a certain replay when talking about
Oh,
game 163 that could really change
100%
things.
in. Not
So
at
be
all.
careful.
There's zero chance. We could jump right there right now if you want. There is zero chance instant replay is overturning the call at the plate on Matt Holliday. There's not enough evidence there to overturn the call on the field. And beyond that, if they had instant replay in that game, Garrett Atkins' ball would have been ruled a home run and not a double a couple of innings earlier. So that's one people have tried to bring up before. Hey, if they had instant replay, Rocky, like, no. Now, I do think if Tim McClellan had called Matt Holliday out, though there was really no way to do that because he never got tagged by the baseball. So he never was, like, whether you think he touched home plate or not, Matt Holliday wasn't out because he was never touched with the baseball, I guess, until maybe he went into the dugout.
Would he have been tagged out? Because I know the ball kind of, caromed off the catcher a little bit. I think that was Barrett at the time.
I
I
believe
think the
so.
ball kind of caromed off, and if the pitcher was covering behind home plate and the umpire, hadn't ruled anything, didn't say safe, didn't say out because the play was still active, would Holiday have been able to crawl back to the plate at the time? I didn't see how far the ball squibbed away. I think he may have. I think
He would have had time, but he himself has said in interviews since there's no way he was going to do that. I don't know why he volunteered that information. Just tell us you would have gotten back to the plate, Matt. But he said he was so out of it that there was no way he was crawling back to home plate after that collision. So even though he may have had time, he didn't have the ability.
No. He barely had enough ability, I'm sure, to breathe while 40 of his teammates and coaches were piling on top of him in celebration of Jamie Carroll's big success sacrifice fly there. So yeah, that was so interesting of a play, and it just will forever go down as one of those plays in all-time baseball history of, was he safe? Was he out? We, of course, in this market, that's one of the all-time plays that you think about, that you can have discussions about. It's one thing when Todd Helton hits the walk-off homer to keep them alive. That's no doubt it went over the fence. Even if you played in a different ballpark, that's a home run. There's no what discussion is there to have? But that's one of the beautiful things about baseball, that when you have instant replay and things of that nature, you do lose a little of that. But regardless, a Holiday, did he touch home plate? Did he not? Game 163, Padres, Rockies. No matter where you are, Southern California or in Colorado, if you're a baseball fan, you know that play, and that is something you talk about. That is something you discuss about. When we get back to DNVR, the bar, those conversations are going to be going on almost on a nightly basis. Of, yeah, well, he had cleat marks on his hand. That's evidence enough that he didn't get his hand in there. Well, wait a minute. If there were cleat marks on his hand, that means he slid it under, and the cleat was on top of him. So
Yeah.
that's one of the beautiful things about baseball is the discussion, is the conversation. And again, no matter where you're at, this play goes down as one of the all-time memorable.
Yeah, I almost wish it was more famous, and if it had to be because of the controversy, then that's fine too. I think, yeah, if this was a play that had happened between the Red Sox and Yankees, it would be a legend already. It would be something people talk about all the time. And of course, out here in our corner of the world, it is when Bud Black was hired as the manager of the Colorado Rockies. The very first question he got almost a full decade later. In fact, I think he was hired just before the 17 season. So it would have been exactly a decade later. And the first question was, did Matt Holliday touch home plate? Now, how do you feel about being in Colorado? What do you think about this young pitching staff? Nice contract. None of that. Did Matt Holliday touch home plate? And that's kind of how it should be. And he submits to this day that he did not, which I appreciate the competitor in Bud Black insisting. The other thing people forget is like it was a tie ball game with all that mess going on, even if he'd been ruled out. I think Todd Helton would have made his way over to third base. He had been walked, something like that. So it's also not like if he's ruled out there, the Rockies lose the baseball game either. There was still an opportunity with a base hit right after that to win it. Or would that have been the third out?
No, that was
That's the second out. Oh, so okay, yeah. So yeah, there was plenty of time for the Rockies to still win. Holiday's out.
That would have been a double play. You're right. The fly ball that Giles catches, and then all right. So then you're right. There would have been 2 outs.
But yeah, so you've still got an out to work with in that inning with a runner in scoring position. So we can play. I love playing the what if game, and we should all day. We just got to remember all of it. That's all.
And that's kind of that's a problem if you're having that conversation. Is well, somebody else would have had the opportunity. That game there was a lot of heavy lifting by the top of the Rockies order.
Yeah.
And the bottom just wasn't gaining traction. If you go 1 through 5, from Kazmatsui, Tulo, Holiday, Helton, Adkins, those guys were 11 for 26, including 4 walks. So
wow,
they did it all. And then if you go from 6 to the bottom of the order, including all the pinch hitters, they were 12 for 28. So they not quite as much. Actually, I think those numbers are skewed. It was 2 for 28. Excuse me.
I was gonna say 12 seems like 2 minutes. Yeah.
12 for 28. That's almost the exact same batting average. No, they were 2 for 28, and with a couple of walks, and that was mainly from Hopper. He ended up drawing 3 walks unto himself. So the only hits you had was Torrey Alba and Seth Smith, who came on as a pinch hitter. So that bottom of the order hadn't been doing much of anything. There was nobody left on the bench. So what likely would have happened was they would have put Hop on first base for his 4th walk of the game. And then you had Ortiz's spot in the order coming up with nobody else left on the bench. So we would have just kept playing. It would have been going on.
I could have played and played and played. You know what I thought was really interesting along those lines? And I had a lot of issues in hindsight with the broadcast, which at the time I didn't notice because I was so nervous and into the game and just, doing what I was doing. But of course, it was all the stuff I've grown very accustomed to over the years, and just everything about the Rockies, like, well, they sure did, get lucky at the right time. And boy, they sure have momentum. And yeah, they're not very good, but look, here they are. And boy, this ballpark sure is weird. But there was a lot that was made for the Padres about them not having Mike Cameron, which was legit. And then the Rockies had a couple of key hits that went to center field, making it more of a talking point because the Padres didn't have their starting center fielder in the game. Neither did the Colorado Rockies. Willie Taveras' name wasn't mentioned once. And I was kind of shocked by it. I was like, they brought up maybe 7 times that the Padres didn't have their starting center fielder. And boy, things would probably be different for this team if they did. And I'm going, the leadoff hitter and starting center fielder of the other team. And look, we love Spilly and Sully more than most people reasonably should. And those guys defensively, especially like down the stretch, but like they wouldn't have gotten to game 163 if Sully and Spilly hadn't done an extraordinary job that very few people expected them to do. But as Patrick just pointed out, the bottom of the lineup wasn't getting the job done in game 163. There wasn't a whole lot of opportunities for their defense to shine through. Willie Taveras very much could have been an X factor in that game as well. And he was when the Rockies finally brought him back for the NLCS, which was a controversial decision at the time.
Yeah, Matt Holliday late in the season, he had an oblique injury. So it very much was Spilly and Sully in center and in left field. And they had to do a lot of that. Because as you said, after Holliday went out, you had already, missed some time with Taveras. So, man, it was rough. And it was more about the defense at that point than it was in regards to the offense at the bottom of that lineup. So it was a difficult time, and it took all 25 guys on that roster and the bench. And it's been said many other times that really it doesn't take 25 guys, it takes 40. It takes more than that, right? It takes, if you have a guy that goes on a 60-day IL, somebody else has got to come up. Or last year we saw Mark Reynolds, Chris Iannetta, essentially hit the end of their career. They're gone, and now two young guys need to come up and fill their spot. So it takes a lot more than that, and you saw that late in the season where, hey, Joe Koshanke, come on up. We need you for the 2007 postseason run. And there
Right.
were a lot of guys like that, and they might not have contributed statistically. You go back and look and say, yeah, this guy, he kind of just had a cup of coffee for a little bit, Koshanke in particular, but those guys are needed. Sometimes you need a competent body to be out there, and sometimes you run into one too, and you make a big play. And Rockies got that out of a lot of guys. It wasn't just Tulo, Holiday, and Helton. It was a lot of guys chipping in and bringing it all together to win those 21 games in 22.
Yeah, and it really is like all those guys did their part. So in these moments, in a game like Game 163, the stars could shine through, and they really did. Helton hits a big home run. Holiday drives in too low for the game tying run once they'd fallen behind. Of course, the announcers mentioning that your Alba's home run was a Coors Field home run, but Adrian Gonzalez's wasn't for some reason. It's just the weird stuff that people come up with. But yeah, the stars really came through in that game. And then some of I feel like the role players who came through were mostly bullpen guys. And it was that way throughout a lot of the season. Now, I had remembered particularly Ryan Spire. But were there any of those middle relievers the Rockies brought away? It was Matt Hergis, Taylor Buchholz, Ryan Spire. Did you find yourself going, who, what?
Well, Taylor Buchholz came up in the Phillies organization. I saw him when he played for the Blue Claws, so I was familiar with him.
Of course he did. Of course he did.
Of course he did. I scouted him. I got to scout low A, South Atlantic League baseball, and but Hergis was the guy who jumped out. He had a very competent career as a reliever. He was interesting in this game because he was both like the unsung hero, because he 3 shutout innings. I mean,
yeah,
all in the extra innings, 10th through 12th inning. That's unbelievable. But he was also kind of the catalyst for climax, because again, 3 goose eggs he put up, but he was in 3 separate jams, right? In the 10th inning, it was first and second with 2 outs because he had given up a single to Termel Sledge. How about that for a great name? Termel Sledge. And he walked Michael Barrett.
Sledge. Yeah.
In the 11th, it was even worse. It was first and second with only 1 out. And that was, and again, here's another piece that doesn't get talked about too much. Jamie Carroll, hey, game-winning RBI in the biggest game of essentially the Rockies franchise. Well, he very easily could have been the GOAT, because he had a throwing error to lead off the inning. Scott Hairston reached first base, and then, of course, they intentionally walk Adrian Gonzalez, so it's first and second with 1 out, right? Winning run in the 11th inning at second base, and all because Jamie Carroll comes in as a defensive replacement for Garrett Adkins. So that dialogue right there, all of that could have changed. And then in the 12th, it's the same thing. He walks Morgan Ensberg to start the 12th inning. So a lot of traffic on the bases for Matt Hergis. But at the end of the day, 3 shutout innings keeps it alive for the Colorado Rockies.
Yeah, and fun side note, not so fun. Matt Hergis is, to my recollection, the only member of the Colorado Rockies franchise ever to be known to have used PEDs. During the Mitchell report steroid era. I know there have been a couple of guys who've been suspended, one just last year, minor league players, but guys who've made the bigs, as far as I know, he's the only one.
While active with the Rockies, or just
yes, yeah. I'm sure because they had Jason Giambi on the team after. Yeah, but I'm saying while being a member of the Rockies, the only guy whose name to ever show up in a report or anything like that. Because yeah, I mean they've brought in guys who've definitely been heavily associated with at times. I'll tell you what. the wait is finally over. DraftKings is the official betting partner of DNVR, and they are bringing legal sports betting to Colorado. Well, games 163 may not be the game you wanted to bet on necessarily. There's going to be a lot of fun stuff to do here very soon. So before you know it, sports are going to be back, and it's way more fun to watch when you've got skin in the game. The best way to get in on the action is with DraftKings Sportsbook, America's top-rated sportsbook app. Yes, it's that DraftKings. They've launched an online sportsbook created by sports fans for sports fans. It's not an offshore operation like these other gambling sites. It's legitimate, based right here in the U.S. You can be confident that your funds are secure. With DraftKings Sportsbook, you can bet from wherever, whenever. You don't have to leave your house, and we don't have to wait too long before there are major sporting events to bet on, including the UFC returning to the octagon this weekend. NASCAR is getting back out there. That's technically a sport. And so there are future bets that can be made right now. I'm pretty sure baseball has several of these. There are free pool survivor bets on TV shows like Chopped and Shark Tank. And we're even going to be working on some customized DNVR lines for you guys. I'm sure we're going to have stuff about The Bachelor. We'll leave that up to RK. We'll have all kinds of baseball stuff for you. One of the first things I thought of when they said, you guys are gonna be able to come up with some of your custom lines was all the years we've done like over under on the Rockies winning a game in Miami, stuff like that. Where we know there's this weird special history to a thing. So now you can make a bet on whether or not the Rockies can actually win a game in Miami, stuff like that. Whether or not.
We can even do face-offs between two different guys. Hey, who's going to hit more home runs in 2020 or 2021? Nolan Arenado, Trevor Story. Who's going to have more extra base hits? David Dahl, Ryan McMahon. Who's going to finish higher in the MVP race? Is it going to be Charlie Blackmon? Is it going to be Story, Arenado? There's numerous different possible combinations that you're going to be able to place a bet on. And in the meantime, go in right now, because you can place a free bet to win anywhere from $500 to $1,000 on what the weather and temperature is going to be like tomorrow in Colorado. Yes, that is a real awesome thing. It's a free bet thanks to DraftKings Sportsbook.
So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use code DNVR when you sign up. For a limited time, all new users can get a sign-up bonus of up to $1,000. That's right. DraftKings Sportsbook has a sign-up bonus up to $1,000. Don't forget to enter code DNVR and get that sign-up bonus. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook. You must be 21 or older, Colorado only. Bonus comprised of a first deposit bonus and a first bet match, each up to $500. Deposit bonus requires 25 times playthrough. Restrictions do apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. And if you've got a gambling problem, please call 1-800-522-4700. So jumping back into the game, and excellent work from Matt Hergis, Taylor Buchholz, and of course, Ryan Spire. My favorite thing about Ryan Spire is that he was one of those relievers you just grabbed from AAA who was doing like okay. And he came up and finished the year just absolutely crazy good for the Rockies. And he picked up the first save of his Major League Baseball career, I believe, in the NLDS. It might have been in the NLCS, but it was definitely in the postseason. He had never picked up a save before. It was like, man, the Rocky, like you going back to your point of it, it's not just the 25 guys. They counted on a good 35 to 40 dudes to get to the World Series and win that National League pennant.
Yeah, it was the NLCS that he recorded a save, and he only played parts of 4 years, a total of 99 innings, but dude, as a member of the Colorado Rockies, had a 3.99 ERA. So that's impressive. I would say that's impressive.
Yeah. Especially, the more relievers we look at over the years, that's certainly better than average. Love this one from Tim Optics, who said, I wish there was an over-under on how many real games the Rockies will play before Bridich gets fired. That's a thing we could create. That's a thing we could look into, though. A lot of people, you might not want to vote with your hearts on that one. You might. I'll say this: you're looking for our analysis on which line you should take. probably the over, and I'm not even sure what the line is right now. We have to figure that one out. So yeah, jumping back into the game here and the rest of that season, I guess I'll tell a little bit of my story now since I've skimmed over it a bit. So the big sort of umbrella of this game 163 for me is, and I've mentioned this before, and I won't get into the details on the podcast because one, it would be way too long, and two, it's just a bit much. But I'll say a blanket. I was going through a very hard time, probably the most difficult time in my life ever. Almost certainly it was this sort of few months in my life that happened to take place when the Rockies were going on this run. And so I very much was using it as an escape all of September, having 3 hours a day to go somewhere and not think about what was going on in my real life. And, kind of as a part of all of this, when it appeared the Rockies were going to be doing what they were going to be doing, they had a big weekend series against the Diamondbacks right before this game 163. And my folks came into town to visit me, to check on me, to make sure I was going to be okay, and to go to some baseball games. And we went to, I'm going to try to remember this accurately without looking it up. My recollection is that they won the first and third game of the series and lost the middle one. And we didn't go to the middle one that they lost, pitched by Jeff Francis. We went to the two that they won. The thing I do remember is that, of course, the final game of that series, which was the final game of the season, was an afternoon, probably a Sunday afternoon game. And before that was the Padres and Brewers. And we sat at sports column with my mother and father, and it was packed, obviously. And we watched the final 3-4 innings of that game, and we watched Tony Gwynn Jr. get the hit off of Trevor Hoffman to make the game 163 even possible. Then we had to walk across the street and watch the Rockies actually win the game. They still had to go, and they did. They thumped them. It was a runaway. After the Diamondbacks, with their one win in that series, had clinched the division and celebrated on Coors Field with games to play. And the Rockies came back, got the much-needed win with the Diamondbacks clearly relaxing, went on to win Game 63, and, of course, would go on to sweep the Arizona Diamondbacks in the NLCS. Maybe wouldn't even have had a chance there if not for Tony Gwynn Jr., but also if the Diamondbacks had tried to come out and bury the Rockies like they should have.
Yeah, the Rockies had won 11 games straight at that point when the Diamondbacks, came to town, and the NL West was hanging in the balance. And again, things kind of lined up really well for Arizona because they were going against Brandon Webb, who's a name that a lot of people may have never even heard of. And
he was a stud at the time.
He's phenomenal. He was the Cy Young Award winner in 2006, the previous year. He was the runner-up in the National League and Cy Young Award in 2007 behind Jake Peavy. So again, Rockies really had to earn that wild card berth.
Yeah.
Runner-up in 2007, runner-up 2008, and was just this phenomenal pitcher. Just absolutely phenomenal, and ended up having shoulder issues. He started on opening day in 2009 against the Rockies, and he never pitched in the majors again. So think about that. 2006 Cy Young Award winner, 07 runner-up, 08 runner-up, one start in 2009.
He was done.
He was done. Yeah.
He was a nightmare. He threw a sinker like a bowling ball. I know I'm not the only person to use that analogy, but it was for a team, too, that has all these hit the ball in the air, Tulo, Holiday, Helton. Helton handled him, I feel, a little bit better than others. But I feared facing him back in the day more than anybody, more than Jake Peavy, more than even the guys like the Phillies. That was kind of when the Phillies were putting together like the Roy Halladay. Maybe that came a little bit later, but Cliff Lee, that whole rotation. Those guys did not scare me. When I saw Brandon Webb on the schedule, I went, no more than 2 runs today, boys. No more than 2. Got to make them count. Got to pitch good. Got to play defense. And I remember in that game, I think the Diamondbacks scored early on a little squibber up the middle against Jeff Francis, who'd been hot. I went, I don't know that we're going to get this one. And they didn't.
Yeah,
That's the one they lost.
yeah, and to be fair, Colorado was able to eke out 2 runs against Webb. So when he came out of the game in the eighth inning, it was it was still 4-2 uh, Diamondbacks at that point. But you got to like the fact that you were able to kind of get past him to get into the bullpen. But again, at that point, Jose Valverde is a name that a lot of people might not
Hey,
remember, or
there he
they
is.
remember him later in his career. He's a more rotund relief pitcher, kind
That's
of
right.
the Latin version of David Wells, I think, in a lot of ways. But Jose Valverde he was a beast. He was one of the top closers in the game at that time. And again, whether you're winning 11 games in a row or not, those teams or those two guys in particular, they were a force to be reckoned with against Arizona. And their win streaks could have been ended in San Diego, right? Because they won 3 straight at Petco, and the Padres were riding a 7-game win streak, and Rockies were only at 5 at that point.
Right.
And that was kind of the first chink in the armor, the first opportunity for them to show, hey, we can beat Peavy, because they were able to get past PV somewhat effectively in one of those games.
Right.
He threw 7, and it was the 14-inning game that they ended up winning, and because they were in third place, like that's what's seemingly improbable. The winning 21 out of 22 games, 7 of the back third of those 21 games were in the playoffs. That's not taking anything away from it. It's just the simple fact that they had to win 14 out of 15 to get into the
To get
playoffs
them.
with some luck, right? Because they were 4 games over 500 at that point. Not bad. Hey, that's a good ball club. But on September 15th, they were 76 and 72, third place, behind 2 teams at the top of their division, with first in the NL Cy Young, second in the Cy Young voting, and they were able to almost win the division at that point. And it's just so improbable, and it really was only that locker room that believed in them to do it. I mean, I'm sure there were plenty of fans that
I
said,
believed.
hey, these guys can do it, but it was like, if they didn't, you wouldn't have been shocked. And even though they did, you were shocked, because nobody wins 14 out of 15 in a season. You don't do that. And you don't get the help that you get from the other teams. It's, as you mentioned, Tony Gwynn getting that walk-off hit against his former babysitter in Trevor Hoffman, right? His dad was teammates, Tony Gwynn and Trevor Hoffman. They're 1-2 as far as the all-time players in Padres history, and
Mm-hmm.
who's the guy to do it? Tony Gwynn. And it's so interesting, because a very similar scenario happened this year when the Rockies swept the Brewers, and they were unable to win the
Messed them
NL
up.
Central and
Yep.
and topple the St. Louis Cardinals. So the other interesting thing too that I had found out when I went back to look at this game, and this was kind of mind blowing. So you talk about how helpful the Brewers were in winning those 2 games, and the Brewers, they were out of it. They were an over 500 team, but they could have hung it up, but they understood what was on the line, and that people were going to be watching their game too, all across the United States. Whether you were an AL East fan, kind of like myself, or my father was undoubtedly a diehard Yankees fan, you were going to tune in to see who's going to win that matchup. And here's what's crazy about that game: in the final game of the season, Prince Fielder, another blast from the past, whose career unfortunately ended early due to injuries.
Yeah.
Prince Fielder had 18 career stolen bases. He stole 2 in that game. Let me repeat myself.
I didn't remember that.
Those were his only stolen bases of the entire 2007 season. He stole second base twice. More than 10% of his career stolen bases came in a game that meant absolutely nothing to his team, but absolutely everything to the team in the other dugout.
See, I knew
Yeah,
Prince
step
Fielder was a
up.
Hall of Famer. I knew that
Yeah,
guy was a
step
Hall of
up.
Famer. That's amazing. That one I didn't know. There, we should do at some point a top 10 list of the most improbable or most amazing or most whatevery things of this whole run, because you had mentioned, in fact, Will's got here, the guy that handled Brandon Webb appears to have been Brad Hopp with a career 1.246 OPS against him. You had mentioned that series out there in San Diego in the 14 inning game, and Brad Hopp. So there's one thing that can maybe go on the list. Brad Hopp hitting an inside out golf shot, opposite field home run in the 14th inning in San Diego in the Marine Layer to win that game. Probably makes the top 10, but it might not make the top 5. Like, because if we're talking, because the top 5 is going to be things like Tony Gwynn's hit, the slide at home plate, you know, all those kinds of things. But I don't know where else, you know, Takeshi Saito had not blown a save all season until Todd Helton got him on that home run, the game that really started the whole thing that we talked about Corey Sullivan with. That's probably in the top 5. The Dodgers, class of the division, the closer on the mound who hasn't blown a save. These guys are a powerhouse, and the Rockies go out there. And yeah.
Saito had a 1.40 ERA for that season. And if you take out that appearance where he gave up those 2 runs, I mean his ERA is even lower than that. He finished 8th in the Cy Young Award voting. Was actually the second best reliever as far as votes go for the Cy Young Award after Billy Wagner. But the dude was, he was absolutely shut down. He was a beast. And it was in Los Angeles too, on top of all of that.
No, that game was in Denver. The one that got the one that Helton got him was in Denver. But they did get them in LA a couple of times. And Will brings up another great one. The Garrett Atkins hitting an inside the park home run. The day after. That might be the most unlikely thing of all the things that happened during this stretch. With the Rockies got a big rally out of Garrett Atkins hitting an inside the park home run. LJ Maximo, of course, bringing up Jamie Carroll. Just you could even break down that final play into little pieces of it that were the most unlikely. Not just Matt Holliday's slide, but of course Jamie Carroll having the most important and exciting RBI in franchise history.
The most exciting out. You know, that was such an interesting play because, you know, the Giles was positioned perfectly. And, you know, even though he caught the ball over his head, which, you know, certainly, you know, wasn't ideal, his momentum was moving forward. So it was virtually improbable for Holliday to have gotten home at that point. But as we talked about earlier in this episode, everyone in the lineup, you know, following that, you know, it was going to be a hard luck story, and you'd had the pitcher spot coming up with nobody left on the bench. So Holiday's like, this is going to be our best shot. It might be 50-50, but if I stay here on third base, maybe our odds of winning this is now 25-75. At least in that moment, right? Anything can happen beyond that. But if you've got a 50-50 shot to win it in one play, you got to put on the defense at that point. And that's what Jamie Carroll did. He went the other way. He knew which guy to hit it to, and the rest is history.
The rest is history. Hey, if you want to make history, well, you got to find a way to beat our guy Patrick at WGT Golf, because I'm telling you, now I am terrible at this. So I'm mediocre. I'm in the media. If you can beat me, you belong. If you can beat Patrick, you are a king of the WGT Golf course. It is the most popular free golf game in the world. It's played by over 20 million people. You can play on a bunch of cool, real-world famous golf courses, including Pebble Beach, Bethpage Black, and St. Andrews. Compete in head-to-head tournaments with players and DNVR community members from around the world in real time. We're always in there playing, chatting. You can challenge us to stuff. We've got a tournament going on Sunday. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. Patrick is going to embarrass most of us, but make sure if you think you can take him out, come take him out. We need somebody. We need a champion of the people to make sure you get in here and show them how it's done. Make sure that you join the DNVR Clubhouse. Nope, that's not what it's called. Country Club. Brandon Spano and I keep wanting to call it the clubhouse, but it is the DNVR Country Club. It's a free app. It's a super fun game, whether you want to dive into it and try to become a pro, or you just want to knock the golf ball around a little bit, tap on your phone, pass the time looking at some pretty scenery, and just and
All right, while we wait for Drew to get back, again, we're looking at your live comments, and we really wanted to make sure that we gave you a voice. Anyone who's listening out there, what are your memories of 2007? Whether you went to the games or not, as we referenced earlier in the episode, I was in New Jersey. I was on the East Coast at that time, but as a baseball fan, of course, I was tuned into what was going on in Colorado because as a baseball fan, you can't not be interested in a winning streak and an underdog defying the odds like the Colorado Rockies at that point. And so for those of you that born and raised here in Colorado, you have to have some memories, or at least your family has some fantastic tales of what happened during that time, whether you were sitting in front of a television or maybe you're real old school, depending on what rural part of Colorado you're from, you're listening to a radio. But no matter where you were in Colorado at that time or the Rocky Mountain region, the 2007 Colorado Rockies really captured the hearts and minds of baseball fans here in this state and in the entire region. And so we want to hear from you some of your great memories that you had of the 2007 club. Let's see. Timo picks again references that walk-off home run by Todd Helton. And the interesting thing about that was, and you saw that all throughout the run, was the excitement Todd Helton had at that point. Yeah, he was a much more veteran player, but he really wasn't, that old per se. He was still in his early 30s. He was about 30, 31 years old. So it's not like he was this guy maybe getting his final chance. He had been kind of grinding away at a 20-year major league career, and maybe just maybe he would get to feel like a kid and have this opportunity at being an immortal in the playoffs. No, he was much younger than that. But in that home run, his excitement when he hit the walk-off homer against Saito, but it was the fact, and to every man in that clubhouse, they waited for Helton to get back before they even decided to take off their jersey. They didn't want to go anywhere. They wanted their guy, their captain, their leader to come back in and give him that round of applause. It was unlike anything anyone had seen at that point, where just a group of guys just being on that exact same page. And that was the chemistry that elevated that entire roster. They were playing for one another. Of course, they grew up around one another, and that's one of the elements and pieces that Rockies teams still have now is very much being homegrown, because you saw the chemistry of the 2007 club, and you say, man, if you could bottle that up, maybe if we can do that again, another team of guys that get counted out, maybe they can do that. And so they all waited for Helton to come back in, and man, that was quite an exciting game in Colorado at Coors Field. So thanks for sharing that, Timo. LJ Maximo, we became an official baseball town. The city turned purple. Yeah, I know at the time, I don't know if Spilly, his recollection kind of got tweaked, but I know he had said that at the time, the fervor in the city and the outpouring of support in Denver, they called it the Purple Storm. I hadn't heard that before, but that's an interesting take on it. You could go with a Purple Storm. There's nothing wrong with that.
there was hello everybody. Thanks, Patrick. Well, this great show. I was enjoying it. Um, yeah, they even the Capitol building turned purple. A lot of there were a lot of things I remember. You know, people were putting out all the signs. Denver just turned in. It really did. That's not completely symbolism when LJ Maximo says the city turned purple. It was everywhere. It, and I was living in Boulder at the time, as I am now. I don't know why I specified that, but um, and you couldn't go and get a slice of pizza or go and grab a beer or go anywhere out and about without people talking about the Rockies. And it's the only time in my life that's been true. As great as 2009 was, as much fun as 17 and 18 were, at least for me, um, there was never that time where the whole city was just captured by it. I remember coming home from that game the Timo Pix is talking about here. What was it? Attended the Saturday D-backs game, fifth inning, bases loaded, two lows up. To my recollection, opposite field grand slam. I was at that game as well, and I remember making the drive back to Boulder and stopping to get a slice of pizza before going home, and the guy giving me my pizza, shaking his head and going, "Too low, too low." My God, too low. And I, like, we were all just collectively stunned. Um, it was absolutely amazing. And the city really did turn. Like I remember being, I think that now we're moving forward a little bit, but I was at game 3 of the NLDS. I've talked about that, the blackout game. Ubaldo Jimenez pitched to Jim. Jeff Baker got the game winning single through the right side. And I remember walking out onto into Lodo, into a sea full of people. For the first time, the Colorado Rockies had ever advanced past the first round of the postseason. And still to this day, the only year in which the Colorado Rockies have advanced past the first round of the postseason. And standing in the middle of this swarm of people, and everyone was just happy and high fiving and hugging. And I remember a guy, and it was like you could think this was negative, and I want to tell this story as positively as I can. But there was a guy outside of Coors Field standing up on the bronze statue of the player there. He was kind of up on the pedestal, and he was holding a big sign that says "Jesus saves." And I just remember someone in the crowd yelling out, "Yeah, but not quite as well as Manuel Corpus."
Hi-oh.
It was right there.
I imagine nobody wanted to go home. It was just you just wanted to
We
stay in
didn't.
that moment. It was so magical, right?
I remember when I finally did getting in the car an hour and a half, 2 hours after the game had ended. The streets are full of people. It was stop and go traffic. I've never been less frustrated in stop and go traffic in my life. And people are coming up, tapping on the windows. No one's banging things, no one's flipping stuff over, lighting things on fire. But hey, did you see they won the game? Did you see the game? They won the game. We were all at the game, and it was LJ Maximo. Yep, the Lodo bars loved it. I'm sure they did. You couldn't sleep at night. Same. It was just, yeah. Why? What are we going home? Or like I said, in my slow drive out, I had the windows down. I'm high fiving people out the window of my car, all the way out of Denver. And then, like I said, and then I got home, and the pizza guy was like, "Did you see the game?" I'm like, "I was at it." it unreal, unreal time to be a Rockies fan.
Yeah, you know, the purple storm of what that is, and the entire city turning purple. In a sense, the Broncos helped with that. I think they had started off that
The
season
orange
two and
shit.
0 early on, but then they had lost two in a row,
Yeah,
and there was a bye week in there, so it was like, okay, well, let's kind of take a pause on things with the Broncos because it had been just again unlike anything else that the city had experienced before since getting a franchise in 1993. It's like those are
right.
the banner years is 93. Hey, we're on the map. You gotta have something Rockies. You gotta wear it to school, and then okay, and then it plateaus for a little while. And yeah, the Blake Street Bombers are nice. There's a small uptick, right? Nothing major, and then nothing for virtually a decade. And then 2007, and it's like, oh yeah, that's right. There is playoff. There is more baseball in October, and we're in it. Yeah, let's go. Wait, we're winning. Yeah, let's go. Like,
Right.
yeah,
So
there's more to it.
and if you really want to back up, my story, there's something really interesting here because okay, let's go back to the beginning. You've opened up a can of worms for me here now, Patrick. I entered T-ball, turned 5, 6, whatever it was, the year the Colorado Rockies officially began to exist, right? 1993. I turned 6 years old. So I enjoyed those early years as a kid. Hey, we've got baseball and Blake Street Bombers, and they did go to the postseason the one time in '95, and the team was great, and every game was sold out. And Lodo was becoming more a place to be, but still wasn't early then. And then there was this gigantic lull. Now, early on, I was die hard, ride or die, no matter what. So even into the early 2000s. But then they trade Larry Walker. What, 03? I want to say 2002, 2003. And then it really started to get, now I'm starting to wear down. Okay, the team hasn't been good since 95. They just traded my favorite player. I don't know these guys. It seemed like every year there was a group of just unknown players coming through, and the dealing Dan at the time, Dan O'Dowd, who, love you, Dan, if you're listening. Was the thing just became, once these guys have value as veterans, move them all out. And we watched a bunch of guys from the Rockies who were like pretty good pieces of the team. Pedro Estacio, Sean Chacon, Larry Walker, go and win World Series rings almost immediately with other teams. The early to mid 2000s were basically the Rockies are bad, and whenever they get a good player, they trade him to a team where he'll go and win. And that happened over and over and over again. And around 04, 05, I can't believe I'm going to say this, stopped watching baseball. The Denver Nuggets were my team. I dove deeply into the NBA and Carmelo Anthony and that whole thing. I did not miss a single Nuggets game during Carmelo's career, basically. I'd say I watched 90 to 95% of the Nuggets games played in the 7 years Carmelo Anthony was in Denver. And from 04 to early 07, I mean, I'm a baseball fan. I'd turn on the Rockies game if it was on, but I'd probably catch half of them. For me, half, less than half. And yeah, LJ, this is when they started calling it the Todd and the Toddlers era, where there was Todd Helton, and Sully even referred to himself as a toddler on this podcast the other day. And there was this group of, and every year, here's Clint Barmas. Is he a thing? Kinda. Here's this guy. Is he a thing? Kinda. Here's this guy. Is he a thing? And then here's Matt Holliday. Is he a thing? Yeah, actually, he appears to be a thing. But it was still just the one extra one. Garrett Atkins, Brad Hopp, they're kind of things. These guys all came up together. And I'll never forget this. Or at least I hope I never forget it. Flipping on a random game in May of 2007. And I probably didn't watch hardly anything in April. Here's another season. The Rockies are going nowhere. They've got two players I've heard of, Helton and Holliday. And they called up this rookie with a name I couldn't pronounce. And I went, here we effing go again. A bunch of nobodies, some kid who's supposed to save the team, a shortstop who's 6'4" and has a name we can't pronounce. They're going nowhere. This pitching staff sucks. I'd never heard of two of the pitchers who would get called up mid-season and be a powering force for them making it, Ubaldo Jimenez and Franklin Morales. But I was out. And then this team started winning, and my turning point was that year there was an interleague series with the New York Yankees at Coors Field, which doesn't happen very often. You don't get the Yankees at Coors, so it's must-watch television regardless. So I actually went to all three of those games, and I was coaching Little League Baseball at the time. And the Rockies swept the Yankees. And when they won that third game, I remember calling a buddy of mine and saying, the Rockies are going to the postseason. This team is legit. This is going to happen. And then they struggled for the next month really bad until making that run in. So I looked stupid for a minute, and then I looked really smart. But that this run didn't just come on the back of a season where it didn't look like it was going to be there. It came on the back of a decade where it looked like these guys got no shot. And then I did like that team, for the most part, did come back to the postseason in 2009. So as much as people want to say, hey, they caught lightning in a bottle, it was a total fluke. Great story. Magic. I kind of hate it now when people use the word magic. Like, I know what they mean. Mean it in a positive way, I'm good. But it was also a very good baseball team that played incredible baseball.
Yeah, when the word magic is thrown around, it's kind of similar to like luck, right? But
Yeah.
but luck is a residue of design. Let that sink
Mm,
in for a second, right? It's
mm,
it's like, hey, you got to line things up properly, and hey, maybe only the right outcome happens 30% of the time. But if that's one of those times, well, hey, you could have seen that, right? I think Drew, there's probably a lot of fans in Colorado at that time that probably had fallen off because going, in 04 and 05, they had almost lost 100 games. They lost 94 and 95 games
right.
respectively. They were actually in the midst of 6 straight losing seasons. So yeah, while you have Larry Walker on your opening day roster from 2001 to 2004, team's just not very good
Yeah.
overall. So it's like, you know what? Hey, this is, in fact, 2005 was the first year that they dipped under 2 million. So only 1.9 came out to Coors Field that year, which seems insane to have anything even starting with the number 2,
Right.
right? So,
Right.
and then going back to what you said about the Yankees series, yeah, I think the Yankees have probably only played in Colorado maybe 2 or 3 times. In fact, I
Yeah.
remember that I literally this exact second. I remember doing some work at my grandparents' house in North Jersey when that series was being played because the announcers for the Yankees at that time, John Sterling and Susan Walden, um, they were talking about Troy Tulowitzki, and they were talking all about this kid growing up and how he loved Derek Jeter and he wore number 2 for Derek Jeter, and it
Right.
was this whole big thing, and how Tulowitzki was, essentially, the head of the rookie class that season. So that was a big story, and yeah, the Rockies go out and they beat essentially, arguably, 3 Hall of Fame pitchers:
Right.
Mike Messina, Andy Pettit. Just wait 30, 40 years, he might get in. And Roger
Yeah.
Clemens, who I'm sure eventually will get.
Yeah.
Say what you will, but
Yeah.
all we're talking about is the fact that the Rockies beat them. We don't
Right.
care about his career. They
Right.
beat a guy juiced up, yoked out of his mind.
Mm-hmm.
Don't take that away from the Rockies. They did that. They beat them. All 3 of those guys were stuck with the loss in that game.
I
So,
love the full case that you're making here. I feel like that needs to be made more often. Like, yeah, you can look at all the ways in which the Rockies got lucky, but look at the pitchers they beat to get where they got. That's it. I hadn't even thought about that much. Yeah.
yeah, between PV and Webb, as we said, and again, those are 2 guys that they weren't of the same Messina Clemens caliber, right? Because those guys aren't going to be going to the Hall of Fame. But
But
man,
that season,
at the
yeah,
time, not
yeah,
and not even just the season 2. Again, they had a very big resume. Jake Peavy was a guy that he was on the road to maybe eking his way into the Hall of Fame. He was almost like
yeah.
a Zach Greinke type guy where, all right,
Hmm.
you're gonna have to compile a little bit towards the end of your career, and if you do it long enough, you'll get to 250 wins, etc. Webb was incredibly dominant for 3 seasons, but that was it. So he didn't even get a chance for an argument to be made. But with Peavy there, even when he went to Chicago, he still made an All-Star appearance with the White Sox at that point. It was like, if he can turn it around, there could be a case made for him. He was a right-handed version of Andy Pettit in a sense, as far as
Right.
talking about a guy who you can make the case he could be a Hall of Famer, maybe not, and PV just kind of lost it towards the tail end of his career. So yeah, the Rockies, they earned every bit of what they did in that '07 season.
Will says, I remember one of the New York Post headlines after they got swept in that last game, the Yankees, that is. Obviously, New York says that fog started, lost in a fog. You got to appreciate that. And that's part of how he earned that nickname, the Dragon Slayer, was beating pitchers with far better reputations and really just better stuff, just better pitchers. But he figured out how to win those games. Smart guy. We got to get Josh. We got to get the Fogger on the podcast, man.
There's probably another New York paper that they went a different way, and they said, they Purple Haze was the headline. Purple Haze, fog smokes out,
Yeah.
Messina in 4-3. That was
Sure.
another one, I'm
Yes.
sure.
That's hilarious. Do you remember the story? I think it was the New York Post that Bud Black told about when they were with Kansas City. He and Vita Blue, and they went to New York and got absolutely beat up by the Yankees in a doubleheader. And the New York Post headline was Yankees destroy Royals black and blue.
Oh, so good. Yeah, that is really good.
Come on.
I mean, creative, but also it's right there on a silver platter. So
it's there for you. It's one of those things where you almost wonder, are other people going to have this headline if I roll with it? What are the chances?
And again, that's the beauty of sports, is that you can't write these things, because if you have a book and you toss in a couple characters, Vita Blue, Bud Black, oh, Black and Blue, you're like, oh my God, this author. I mean, this is a good book.
Right.
I'm enjoying the tale he's telling, but come on with the names.
Right.
But sometimes, truth is stranger than fiction.
Love it. Love it, love it, love it. Speaking of one or two more things before we wrap this one up from our improbability, truth is stranger than fiction file. There were a couple of things you had mentioned, again, not to just belabor the point about the run at the end wasn't everything. One thing I always like to point out too is the Rockies ran into a terrible string of bad luck right before the 15 games in a row or 14 games in a row came. They lost some really tough ones in St. Louis and Chicago in particular. I remember them losing a game where Troy Tulowitzki had hit a go-ahead home run in the top of the ninth in Chicago. And Kaz Matsui, who committed, again, to my recollection, 4 errors all season. Can we double check that? I believe that's right. 4 errors all season. One of them cost the Rockies that game. It was in the 9th inning. He dropped a ball right at him to start a whole rally. The Rockies lose that baseball game. And they had gone on a stretch there. As we were talking about before we came on here, the 2007 Colorado Rockies had to replace their closer because Brian Fuentes, who had been lights out the first several months of the season, probably the best strikeout artist out of the bullpen in Rockies history, he just lost it. And I think he blew like 4 or 5 saves in a week. And again, those are all games where you go, man, if they had maybe made the change over to Corpus a little bit sooner, or if their closer just hadn't had this random middle of the season meltdown, they wouldn't have needed all those games and they would have maybe more comfortably, and maybe they win the division. But yeah, a team that had to mid-season get rid of their closer, put another one in there, a rookie in Manuel Corpus, or at least a very young player, a guy who didn't have any kind of track record of success in Major League Baseball, and make that run with him, I think needs to be a bigger part of the conversation as well.
Yeah, no, he was a rookie, as he had only had 32 in a third innings pitch the previous season, but was fantastic. 2.08 ERA, yeah, 19 saves, basically most of them coming in that second half, and was just absolutely unbelievable. And even the play that he made to I can't remember what game it was.
I think you're thinking of Game 3 of the NLDS. That's the one I was there because I was sitting up the third base line. Maybe you're thinking of a different one, but Game 3 of the NLDS definitely ends this way: a swinging bunt up the third base line. Manuel Corpus runs right at me. He's looking at me in the eyes. Watch the video. He's looking at me right in the eyes. He picks up the ball barehanded with his back to first base, and he turned around and threw that thing like a dart to first. And how many hundreds of times have we seen pitchers, especially relief pitchers, throw that thing into the stands or down the right field line? And it was as athletic a play as defensive play as you're going to see a relief pitcher make.
Yeah, that was, and I think Dan O'Dowd even said about the play, it was like, you do that 100 times, he's throwing that ball into right field 99 times, and the fact that he made in that one play is just phenomenal. And yeah, Helton was just so exuberant again. Where when we stepped away for a second and just talked about just his just childlike energy that he had, and he wasn't an old player at that point. He wasn't at the end of his career. I mean, yeah, he had suffered through all those losing seasons, but he was just it was just so exciting for him to be in the middle of that again, especially after all of those losing seasons in a row. So yeah, Corpus was unbelievable, and he goes down in Rockies lore for what he did in that '07 season. Kazmatsu, as you said, only made those 4 errors all season
4.
long. And you're right, it was the second to last play on June 27th, 2007, at Wrigley Field against the Cubs, where again, just on a Ryan Terrio ground ball, he is just a poor throw, and it sets the table for Alfonso Soriano to get the walk-off single, and then end up losing that one 9-8, and they lose the next 2 games after that, and they get swept by the Cubs in Chicago. And if you kind of transpose that with what happened in this past summer with the 2019 Rockies, that summertime, those dog days of summer, whether it's the early part or the late part, you can learn a lot about a team, about if they've got the chutzpah, the cojones, whatever it may be, to kind of fight back from something like that. And when you get swept in a fashion like that, that can be a sign of like, I don't know. I don't know if this team has what it takes. I think you might get 3 of those. You might get 3 of those all season, and you can bounce back. The '07 Rockies did. The 2019 Rockies did not. You look at that
Right.
that that series against the Padres.
Yep.
That was some of the best and worst baseball simultaneously.
Yep.
They split a 4-game series, and everyone's on the edge, and a couple slam doors here and there. We won't go into it any further than that, but that was kind of that was the first domino. And the rest of the summer, they could not rebound, but the Rockies did in '07. They had what it took to get through it, and I think a lot of that has to do with Clint Hurdle and his attitude and his mindset.
100%.
You were there in November, for anyone that doesn't know, and it's one of the reasons why you got to be tapped in to your local SABR chapter, sabr.org. We have one of the finest ones in the Rocky Mountain region. We're considered quite literally the gold standard for what we do, having so many events. Shoot, we even had on the president of the Hall of Fame, Tim Mead. So before this past week, when they announced that they wouldn't be a celebration this summer, Tim Mead let us members know a couple weeks ago. And the one thing that we've had every year for going on about 20 some years is an annual banquet in November. And this past year we had Clint Hurdle, and he talked all about the '07 Rockies. And man, the dude is a motivational speaker,
I
right?
know.
I
Gets
was
you
I was
going.
I was ready to bench press a small Fiat, which is kind of redundant. But man, he just had me all pumped up, and Clint Barnes was there,
Yeah.
and you had Jason Hirsch, who was also on that '07 team, and Thomas Harding. He was the MC in this fantastic conversation and Q&A. And I think a lot of that, again, you talk about the players and what they did on the field, but it was also that coaching staff headed by Clint Hurdle, who helped lead those guys into a place that the organization simply had never been before. And hats off to him for that.
Yeah, I've always thought that Clint Hurdle never got quite enough credit for this, especially because a couple of years later he was sort of seen as the scapegoat when the Rockies got off to a slow start in '09, and then they fired Clint Hurdle, and then they went on the run, the best stretch in Rockies history under Jim Tracy, who basically showed up and let everyone do whatever they want, where Clint Hurdle was, the other way. And did he lose the guys? I think so. In hindsight, the more I talk to people and learn about it, I think also some of the personality of the team changed around him. Tulo's, I can't accept anything less than perfection in winning, and I can't accept losing, and I have to demand the absolute best out of everybody. I think was really good as a rookie when it was tempered by, okay, kid, but you're not the leader of the team. The more he became the de facto leader of the team once Holiday was out of there, especially, I think, and I don't know that there's necessarily one person to blame or not. And obviously, the Rockies did go on to win 92 games, their most ever in '09, but just wasn't a good mix, which is really too bad because I do think that Clint Hurdle. I don't know if there's too many other managers in baseball who could have done with that group for. I just don't think anybody else could have done that, or very few people could have done that with that crew.
And he had that experience with them, obviously as the hitting coach for so many years. So he understood Coors Field, much like Bud Black. I mean, look at the success that he's had with the team. He knows what's going on at Coors Field. He's very familiar from managing the Padres in the NL West. And you say, well, why wasn't that true for Walt Weiss? Well, he was never a big league manager up to that point. Yeah, he was
Right.
familiar with Coors Field, but how does that play in context with the other 14 teams in the NL and the 30 team, MLB and all that? So there were maybe just too many things at play, but Clint absolutely understood what was going on, and yeah, you got to have all the right pieces in play for him to click. And whose fault is it that it fell apart? I think with any relationship, all of the components and all the members of a relationship, are at fault in some shape or form. And yeah, no doubt, like that we know there's relationships in which clearly one party is the loose cannon, but you don't get to that part if the other, part of the relationship, the other member isn't somewhat complicit. It's like
Right.
you shouldn't have even been dating this person, or you shouldn't have even been in this relationship in the first place. So
Right.
that doesn't happen if you don't go, well, okay, yeah, maybe I do want to, make a connection here. So
Well, and that's the funny thing about sports, though, right? Is because a lot of times these relationships are created by a third party, by the
yeah,
general manager, right? So it's sort of like these two people, Tulo and Clint Hurdle, would probably never have come together to be best friends in normal real life. But a general manager put them together, and for a little while, for a minute there, their energies, I think, played really well off of each other. But once Tulo's got a bit bigger, tougher to contain.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at the triangle between George Steinbrenner, his manager Billy Martin, and Reggie
Mhm.
Jackson, who said, "Hey, I'm the straw that stirs the drink in here." And again, it works for a short period of time, and then it combusts. But that's what you go for. That's it. You've got these chemicals that you're bringing together. That's part of the clubhouse chemistry, and you go, shoot, if these things can balance just right, it's gonna go great. And the chemistry with that, it goes bad more often than not. Hopefully it doesn't blow up. And I don't think for the Rockies it did blow up. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, it came to a head, and Hurdle
More,
goes
more
his way.
fizzled out than blew up.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, there are plenty of relationships where it comes to blows in pro sports. I mean, Latrell Sprewell is a great example, and it's an awful example also. But I mean, you have those bad examples where it goes atrociously, but more oftentimes than not, it ends. I mean, even look at Joe Madden. Joe Madden, the toast of the town for the Chicago Cubs,
Right.
wins the first World Series in over 100 years, and then open up any newspaper or read any articles from the last half of the 2019 season, and it's like, oh man, Epstein and Madden, they can't be in the same room together, and this guy's delusional, and this guy's planning their 2020 manager. So that's just kind of how it goes. Two of the guys that we talked about being kind of, again, unsung heroes. We talked about so many of them: Matt Hergis, Jamie Carroll, Manny Corpus, were Corey Sullivan and Ryan Spielborgs. And if
Mm.
you've seen the 21 Days, the really fantastic documentary, definitely go back and watch that. You see those guys as players, and they were important, cogs in the machine, far from superstars. But now we look on a decade plus later, those two guys are still kind of faces within the organization, at AT&T Sportsnet doing the games. And you kind of got a glimpse of their personalities as players, that, okay, they had a knack for talking and they feel comfortable being in front of a camera. And, they understand so many different things on the other side of the game. So my question to you, Drew, is, and I've got a couple in my head, but from this current club, or even in the past couple
Oh,
years, who to you do you think, if they go back and they talk about, this short little dynasty? Because hey, maybe the Rockies win it all in 2020, or at least go to the World Series, or they win it in 2021. You have to talk about the 17, the 18 team, the 19 team. So who in recent memory to you is someone that stands out that you could see, being a part of the DNVR Sportsnet broadcast of the Colorado Rockies,
yeah,
when you and me, we're gonna be doing play by play, but we're gonna need a color guy. We're gonna need to send it back to
right.
the DNVR bar on Colfax, and say, hey, let's get some post game coverage. What current or relatively recent Rockies player do you see is our go to guy?
So I want to mention a couple who are no longer on the team, just because I had thought of them, and I've even written, particularly Daniel Descalso. I know that's a weird random name to be the first one to come out of my mouth, but in a lot of conversations with Daniel Descalso, I think he'll either be a great coach or a great analyst. I think that's almost a lock. The minute he hangs it up, he'll either be in a clubhouse or on television somewhere. And another weird rando to bring up in that way is Michael McHenry, a backup catcher, but it's just like the guy can talk. He knows the game. He's super entertaining. He's awesome. In fact, catchers in general, I think, are good for this. And that's why I'll go with our guy, Tony Wolters. I could see Wolters being a pretty excellent analyst of the game. I could see him being an entertaining TV personality, a la Ryan Spilborghs. He's got enough energy. He can relate to a lot of people. We talked about that with Sully, but you see the way he comes into the clubhouse yelling at the top of his lungs in Spanish, and then goes over and asks John Gray how his video game playing went last night, and then hits the books because now it's time to research the other lineup. I think Wolters would be great for it. I think Charlie Blackmon would be great for it, but I don't think he would have any interest whatsoever in doing that. I think he'd much rather just go fishing and be left alone.
That's a component, is you have, if a guy reaches a certain level, he doesn't need to do that, or it's come on, I'm not even a fisherman, and I'd rather just fly fish the rest of my life. Like, that sounds so much more peaceful and enjoyable, relaxing than, covering sports. So yeah, I think he's lost to that, but
Yeah.
he would possibly enjoy that. Tony Walters, great pick. I think there's a definite shot at that one. That's better than the first guy that came to mind for me, which is Ryan McMahon.
Mm,
Ryan McMahon, great talker, loves to flash those pearly whites. I
yeah.
think he's got a chance to, again, he could ascend and become a multi-time All-Star at second base. And so then you could lose him if he makes too much money. He doesn't need to come back, and do that. But I think McMahon's got enough swagger and understanding of the game where, he could certainly do that. And on the flip side, I could see Carlos Estevez being one of those guys. Very pleasant to talk to. Is he the guy you're just thinking of right now?
No, I thought of a different one, but now I'm mad I didn't think of Estevez. That's great. That's great. That's really perfect. LJ Maximo brings up Dahl is making noise and likable. I put him kind of firmly in that Charlie Blackmon category, where I think if you put Dahl in front of a camera and told him to do some stuff, he'd be great. I don't think he would agree to do something like that.
I tend to agree. Yeah.
Um,
But
ooh,
but maybe he's working on his chops with the MLB The Show. Maybe this is his first foray.
he's getting out there a little more,
He's getting out
and
there.
his wife is in marketing and PR, so I do think she pushes him a little more to go out and do those things. I don't think it's his natural inclination. Will says, going to pick a name you haven't mentioned yet, Dexter Fowler. Dex would be phenomenal on television, and he would have a pick of a couple of different organizations he could do that for. He's managed to endear himself to three of them at this point. Gotta love Dexter Fowler. Tim Optics. Trevor Story is simply a nice dude. I think Trevor Story would be simply a nice dude if you want to sit down and have like an NPR conversation with somebody. But you got to bring the talking energy out of Story. The playing baseball energy, no, he brings that in spades. The entertaining people by talking, again, Trevor's. I don't think it comes naturally to Story, but he's working on that.
I would love to see Bud Black
Oh,
do. He wouldn't, but I would love to see Bud Black as, a color analyst, post game analyst, something like
he'd
that.
be phenomenal.
Oh, he would be so good.
It would almost be too much for some people, I think. It'd be great for like our broadcast of like, can you walk us through why that pitch sequence was something it shouldn't have been? But some people would just be like, what is he talking about?
he would almost he would almost be like a Tony Romo, where it's like, this is too good. This
Right.
is You're making everybody else look bad, and it's yeah. He would bring that kind of verve, so to speak,
I've
to
got Yeah, I totally agree. I've got one more name, and in fact, someone who may be close to having to make a decision like this. And honestly, in the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, I really hope this person is on AT&T Sports talking baseball, but talking specifically Rockies baseball. Chadwick Bettis, the third. No, he's the first Chad. Chad Bettis. He's a great talker. He's a really engaging personality. He's just a wonderful human being. I mean, as well as I know him, whatever. But he really understands pitching at altitude, pitching away from altitude, and he can explain it in understandable human people terms. and so I think, it looks like we'll see if he can catch on with the Yankees a little bit out there. He may be close to the end of his career, and there may be people who look at him and go, why should we be listening to the advice of a guy who was kind of a borderline starter for much of his career and certainly was never a superstar pitcher? But I think that go away after about 5 minutes of listening to Chad Bettis talk.
Yeah, Corey Sullivan and Ryan Spilborghs, they didn't have, very long
Right?
careers. Bettis has been just as long, but there's such a component of guys being superstars. Outside of some of the guys that do it with, like, A Rod, and
A-Rod's good on TV. For
he's
whatever else,
very good.
he's very good on TV.
He's become a lot more enjoyable in his retirement than when he was a player. But him, Frank Thomas, David Ortiz, again, those guys are just doing the post game stuff in a studio, but they're kind of the rare breed, because again, there's contracts and stuff involved, and there's, hey, I just kind of, I want to retire, step away from the limelight, raise their family. So you need a guy kind of in that second tier, like a Chad Bettis, and and he can talk more about what he's been through, his trials and tribulations. He's had he's had to persevere, unlike so many in the game. And so to be able to talk about that and share that with an audience is such a key factor. It's one of the reasons why superstar players, you don't see them become coaches and managers, because for them it was somewhat natural, right? Their gifts took them so far, and then they made minor adjustments along the way. But
Right.
somebody else who's grinding it out, and they're in their late 20s, and they're just now getting their first opportunity at a starting spot, or they're holding on as a utility player in their early to mid 30s. It's like, oh man, dude, there's no hope for you, because you got this going on, you got that, you're too small, your body type, you're beat up. It's like, well, thanks, coach. I feel really good about
Yeah.
being in the lineup today. You just can't elaborate and illuminate all the different details and nuances that are needed. So you need to have those kind of struggles. You need to be an underdog for a decent amount of your career, and not a superstar.
Yeah, I think that's actually a great point. In fact, that might even make him a better candidate for like a pitching coach or a pitching advisor situation in the Rockies organization. And again, I think they should consider that. We talked to Solely about Fogger, a very similar thing there. Someone who can understand the struggles and not just being able to figure things out. I think there are a lot of little things like that. The Rockies. We mentioned a name earlier. I think Clint Hurdle should be involved in this organization in some way. That they're fine at manager, but in the front office, I think so. And Tim Optic says John Gray would be interesting to hear his strategy and color analysis. It would be. Would it be great? I don't know, but it would be entertaining. John Gray on camera. John Gray talking to John Gray is never not entertaining. It's just never not.
He strikes me more as a Yogi Berra type coach with
Yeah.
like just his interesting tales and talking about swimming with what now he wasn't swimming with whales, but he is now. If we're gonna make him this Yogi Berra type guy and talking about these stories and sharing experiences, yeah, hey, when I went swimming with whales in the 2019-20 off season, it really made me appreciate nature and being one. So when you're out there in left field, really feel the grass underneath your cleats. All right, come on, let's go get him today. Thanks, Coach Gray.
Oh,
It would
love
that
it.
would be fantastic. He would be
Oh, I
great.
love it. All right, we do gotta wrap this thing up before too long. So we got a FIFA tournament coming on the Twitch channel, so that should
I
be.
gotta get ready. I gotta get ready for Sunday's WGT tournament.
That's right. I've got to drink a lot of Breck Brew and Manscape. Not to get too personal, I'm just saying. So do you have any final thoughts as we wrap this thing up here? There's always time to talk about the glory days, but we've done it so much now. I just want to make sure that we get our talk on 163 and '07 out of the way so we can move forward into some other discussions here in the next week.
Yeah, now game 163 is just so enjoyable, and as you said it, Todd Helton has said it about if it were Yankees and Red Sox, it would go down in so much more lore and history. I'm sure you would have even seen it, and actually we could see it. We still don't know what's going to be in Ken Burns' next inning, the
Right.
11th inning, because that's 2000 to 2009. So we could go back and see this, and maybe because we see what Ken Burns ended up doing for Buck O'Neill, who was he's one of the first African American coaches. Was a hitting coach with the Chicago Cubs, but other than that, a relative unknown. And then you hear him talk, and you go, okay, this is just one of the greatest human beings of all time. Well, Ken Burns can maybe highlight Coors Field and Colorado Rockies baseball in game 163. Maybe that, elevates this game in a sense, talks about all the lead changes, Colorado being up 2-0, 3-0. San Diego comes back in the third with 5 runs. It's 5-3. Then Rockies tie it up in the fifth, 5-5. Then in the sixth, Rockies are leading 6-5. Then in the eighth, San Diego scores a run, and now it's tied 6-6. 4 shutout innings, and then we go into the 13th, and it's
And it's
it's just it's
crazy.
just electric. So it's a fantastic game. It's never not fun to watch, and even though you know what the outcome is going to be, even though it's going to be a 4-hour ordeal with or without commercials, it's one of it's the most iconic game in Rockies history. Period. Stamp it.
The end. I really hope that and the 21 days doc is really good. I hope that it gets out there more and finds a second life. I'd like to see a bit of a more thorough documentary on just the thing. But yeah, I really hope Ken Burns does dive into it and doesn't just wash over it, which I fear is likely with so many things that go on in a decade and with the Rockies rarely garnering attention from national audiences. I could see the temptation to skip over it. I hope that doesn't happen. But yeah, it's really a story, I think. And there's so much more involved in it that we weren't even really able to get to here. Again, if you go and watch the 21 Days documentary, stuff leading up to it, we had talked about the third base coach who died after getting hit by a line drive, and his kids coming out and throwing out the first pitch at the game. And I think that was game 3 of the NLDS that I was at. The young man that Clint Hurdle had grown attached to, who passed away from it was a cancer, right? And he had written his number on the lineup card every day. Like, that whole story in and of itself could be a little 10 to 20 minute documentary just about the relationship between Clint Hurdle and this young man while all the baseball stuff was going on. And the baseball games could be a backdrop, like the B plot to that story. Telling the story of Kaz Matsui's one real year. He did come in the previous year barely, but this guy who was there for 1 year, one of the very few Japanese players in the history of the team, but was so important to their success that year. He had a grand slam against the Phillies. We didn't even talk about that yet. There's just so many things. So I'd love to see a second life for this. The 21 Days doc is good. I want to see a newer, more in-depth frankly, slightly better. I think it's really good for what it is, but I'd like to see an even better one done more in depth about that whole season and all those guys. But it would almost have to be several episodes long for you to really get all of the details of it. There's just so many things that happened. So I hope everyone's enjoying reliving it a little bit.
I think there's space for that to something like that to happen because so much time has gone by. I think when they did 21 days, it was relatively soon
Right
after.
after, yeah.
You know, you obviously want to capitalize that. The memories are fresh, but there's going to be other stories that come out, and you find out all kinds of interesting, stories that are just like, oh, so that was what was really going on, and whatnot. So you're right. There's so much to extrapolate. Even Clint Hurdle and his daughter's health. There's so many layers to this team, and you can even go back to when they were in the minors and just their
Right.
familiarity with one another, and it's amazing. I hope that something like that doesn't get made for the simple fact that you got to make a new one about the 2020 or the 2021
Ah,
Rockies who win it all. And like, okay, let's move to that one. Let's focus on the stories from that World Series championship squad. And then hey, we're going to forget about 2007 for a while, but that's okay cuz we got something even bigger and better to focus on.
there you go. Nailed it. All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening into this one, joining us in a long walk down memory lane. It's been a lot of fun. If you do have more thoughts on the topic, you can still hit us up with them on social media or through email, or just show up to the next live chat, either on Facebook Periscope, Twitch. Make sure you're following the Twitch channels so you don't miss out on the FIFA tournaments and the WGT. We had a really fun game of party games, Jackbox last night. Patrick is the king of trivia. I am the king of rap. That's just true. You can check the tape. I am DNVR's king of rap. Challenge me. You come at me, you're gonna get the fire, though. That's all I'm saying. It's gonna happen. Check the tape. So thank you all for listening in. I hope you will continue to be absolutely awesome out there. We will continue to be absolutely Patrick Lyons and Drew Creasman in here. And until next time, we will see you at the ballpark.